What's this? Quilt for sale. How much? Do you know who made it? You don't know who made it. I'll take it. Look at you. You're gonna come home with me.
Hi Quilty friends, welcome back. So today I want to talk to you about what might seem as a simple topic, but I really think is probably one of the most important things as quilters we really should probably do. And I feel this way after having these two experiences. One was when I found this quilt at a local yard sale and it's unlabeled. The second one was when I was at a local quilt show and I saw all of these beautiful quilts from the early 1800s, and all of them were labeled anonymous for the maker. And when I saw that, I vowed that I was always going to label my quilts. And I vowed that in an earlier video, and that prompted one of you to put Virginia Woolf's famous quote down in the comments, "Anonymous was a woman." And that got me thinking. So I did a little research to try and understand the why behind this. Well, when we look at history, we know that quilts were most often made for utilitarian purposes in those days. And they were most likely and most often made by women. And the women weren't really not labeling them for any particular reason, because they just viewed them again as utilitarian and did not think that the quilt would potentially last beyond them. The other reason is oftentimes quilts were made by a community of people, so they really couldn't put everyone's names on it. Then the other reason could have been for religious or community reasons, because it could have been viewed as being boastful by putting your name on the quilt, and there's still communities and religious sects today that feel that way. So times have changed, and now the quilting community sees the value in labeling quilts with the quilt maker's name, because it not only preserves the story around the quilt, it preserves your story as a quilt maker, your family, the times that you live in, and your community. And by doing so, this will then carry forward for future generations. That's why it's important for us to label and document our quilts. And I'm going to talk through with you today a few things that you can do to make sure that your quilt doesn't become anonymous. So what do you include on your label? Well, at a minimum, the name of the maker of the quilt, most likely yourself, the date that it was made, and the location where it was made. Now there's some other items you can consider putting onto the label. If you're giving it as a gift, you could potentially put the recipient's name on it and maybe add a little message. You could also consider putting on the name of the quilt pattern and maybe the dimensions of the quilt or something special about the fabrics in the quilt. But that's all kind of up to you, what you want to do. Now, if you one day decide that you want to submit this into a show or some type of contest, you're going to want to make sure that you consult those rules in terms of what they require the label to have on the quilt, And don't panic, you can just put a label over top of your existing one for the entry to the show, and then when you get it back, you can take that label off. Now, here's a tip to help keep tabs on that quilt, especially if you're sending it somewhere to a show or if you're mailing it somewhere. Get an Apple tag, tuck it behind that label, and it'll help keep tabs on your quilt. So where do you put the label? Well, it's your quilt, wherever you would like. You can put it on the front, you can put it on the back, you can piece it into your quilt, you can integrate it into your quilt. The sky's the limit in terms of how you label your quilt. There are lots of different ways that you can label your quilt. Today I'm going to share with you 5 ideas. The first option is you can embroider a label either by machine or by hand. The second option is you can get these fabric sheets that go into your printer. If you have an inkjet printer, you can create the label on your computer, you can print that out, and then attach it to your quilt. The other option is you can just embroider it directly onto your quilt, either again by hand or by machine. Now, you can also get pre-made labels, either from a seller. I've seen them on Etsy, and I've also heard of this site called Sweetwater. I'll put a link to them down below. I've not ordered anything from them before, but I've heard good things about them, so you could check them out. Now, the last option is the one that I do the most, and I'm going to share with you how to do that today. And that is to take either a piece of muslin or a piece of fabric and then use an archival ink and mark it up that way. So I'm going to show you how to make a basic fabric label. And the first step that I take is I get a piece of paper and I write out what I want to put on the label. And I'll actually lay it out exactly how I want to put it on the label so I can get a sense of space. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to find, most likely I pull from scrap fabric, or maybe you have an orphan block that might work for this. But I just look for something that's going to be big enough to meet how much space I'm going to need for the label. And then I always add 1/4 of an inch all the way around, because then at the end you're going to be hemming this 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And then what I'll do is I'll give that piece of fabric a press, and I'll actually put a little bit of starch on it because I want to give it a little bit of body. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is to find something to stabilize that fabric. Now, I like to use my leftover scrap fusible, but you can also use freezer paper, or you can use sandpaper. Now, if you're going to use freezer paper, you would just put the shiny side on the wrong side of the fabric. So wrong side of fabric, shiny side freezer paper, and then press it. And then the fusible, you would just follow the fusible instructions that you do when you're using fusible. And then the sandpaper, you're just laying the fabric on top of it to just give it to some stability. Then what I like to use is a Micron archival ink pen, and I can put a link to this down below in the description for you if you want to check it out. I like these because they come in different colors, they come in different thicknesses, so you can really have a lot of fun with these particular markers. After I've stabilized the fabric, then I will write out my label. And then when I'm done, I will hem it 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And then the last step is to attach it to the quilt. I like to do this before I've done the quilting on the quilt. That doesn't always happen, but that's ideal because then it will get adhered with the rest of the quilt when the quilting gets done. The second thing that we need to do as quilters, after we label our quilts, is to document them. And you can do this a couple of different ways. You can do it digitally, or you can do it with like a scrapbook, whatever you would like. I did this one in Canva. Canva is both a free and paid application. I'll put a link to it down below if you want to check it out. But at a minimum, you should be including these things: a picture of the front of the quilt, a picture of the back of the quilt, a picture of you with the quilt, and then any other pictures surrounding the quilt that kind of tells the story of the quilt. A close-up of the stitching, maybe what inspired you to make this quilt, the pattern name, the dimensions, all those same things that we would include on a quilt label, and even potentially some of those optional items that I mentioned earlier in the video. And you may also want to include like care instructions if this quilt needs special washing care, so that those after you will know how to take care of the quilt. And this is even a document that if you're giving this quilt as a gift, could go with the quilt. But basically what you're trying to do is tell the story of the quilt in this document for future generations. Don't let your quilt become anonymous. Make sure you label it, document it, share it, because the past really does stitch the present to the future. For now, I wish you all well, and most of all, be quilty.